Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. What a show we have in store for all of you, and we are happy to have you with us as a part of it all. It's Jake Fromm today, stopping by for a Kroger Fresh Take. That is going to be a lot of fun. We'll actually get into a little bit different line of conversation with Jake than we sometimes do. I'll tell you more about that here in a moment. I got more bad news for you. Mighty Michigan apparently is just as unbeatable as ever, other than other times they've been beaten, but unbeatable as ever here for the upcoming season. We'll give you the latest evidence of why that's true, I say, with full sarcasm kind of intact on all of that. And off the top of the show, interesting stuff from Paul Finebaum. Alabama fans have gotten used to Finebaum blowing up the Crimson Tide and blowing up Nick Saban, but maybe not quite so much anymore. Maybe Finebaum kind of changing his tune. We'll talk about what all of that means and how Georgia can work this year to make sure the stuff that's being maybe professed about them now turns out to be true at the end of the season there as well. We're going to jam-pack all of this in the next few minutes. Happy to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Sometimes you do stuff on the show just because it's fun, especially on a Friday. You kind of like being in a good mood and kind of going out on the week on kind of a high note. We'll give you an example of that here right now, and then we'll try to make a couple of, I guess, more serious points about this. If you're an Alabama fan, there's something you've sort of gotten used to. Your program's obviously been on top in college football for quite some time, and there is a certain sense of the phrase you may have heard before, to the victor goes the spoils, that not only has your team won the games, but you've gotten lots of pats on the back over the years. You've gotten very used to getting proclaimed as the greatest of all time everywhere you turn, especially in certain situations, like a Paul Finebaum show, for instance. Longtime radio presence in Alabama, now a TV personality in the SEC network. How many times over the course of our lifetime following the SEC have we heard a lot from Finebaum talking about how great Alabama is, how great Nick Saban is in particular? But a lot can change over the course of a brief period of time. And a program like Georgia with a coach like Kirby Smart winning 2 straight national championships, even a guy like Paul Finebaum, who sort of made a living praising Nick Saban in Alabama, even a guy like that eventually has to sort of acknowledge what the truth is in front of all of our eyes, which is that Georgia is now on top of the college football world. So just to have some fun here for a moment, because Alabama fans hate this kind of stuff, let me let you hear from ESPN SportsCenter this week. Paul Finebaum being asked by, I guess this must have been Get Up, actually, more the Get Up show, not SportsCenter, being asked by Mike Greenberg about the current state of affairs in the SEC college football, comparing Nick Saban in Alabama to Kirby Smart, the head coach of Georgia. If you're a Georgia fan, you'll like this because of how much Tide fans hate it. This is Finebaum on Kirby and Saban.
Right this minute, is Kirby the king of college football?
Kirby Smart has surpassed Nick Saban today. Now, I don't need somebody to tell me about the records. We all know that. But in today's world, in 2023, Kirby Smart is a better coach than Nick Saban and has a better program than Nick Saban. The roster is better. There's a quarterback conversation at Georgia, but it's not a conundrum. And that is not insulting, though, to Nick Saban for this reason. Kirby Smart is on the verge, perhaps, of a three-peat. That's why we are saying what we are saying. And I think where it hurts Nick Saban the most, because Kirby Smart has essentially taken the Saban model and possibly perfected it in Athens.
I just think in straightforward fashion, there's really nothing that Finebaum says there that isn't true. For now, Georgia is on top of the college football world. In fact, I'd go so far as to say this, that the real question for this upcoming season in the SEC, for now anyway, isn't so much whether Nick Saban has been surpassed by Kirby Smart, but whether Nick Saban has also been surpassed by Josh Heupel at Tennessee, Brian Kelly at LSU, 2 teams that beat Alabama a year ago. Frankly, the comparisons between Georgia and Alabama aren't all that relevant right now because Alabama wasn't even good enough to qualify for the chance to play Georgia last season. That the real important comparisons for Alabama is not how it compares to UGA. Alabama's got to do some hard work just to earn the right to even be on the same field as Georgia, based on the way that things played out a year ago. For Alabama, it's, are we the best team in the SEC West, or is that LSU like it was a season ago? Do we still have full dominance over a rival like Tennessee, something we enjoyed for many, many years? Or did last season's game demonstrate that's also changing there as well? For Alabama here right now, those are the more relevant questions. But at the same time, I want to be fair to Alabama at least one respect, which is, Finebaum says that Alabama fans, in a comparison between Nick Saban and Kirby Smart, might like to lean towards the past. Well, look at how much Nick Saban's done over the years. And to a certain extent, that's true. Alabama fans have always had a special appreciation for the past, even the imagined past at times that doesn't quite match up with reality. But nonetheless, I think there's also a pocket of Crimson Tide fans who would say it's not just about the past for our program. It's about the future. They believe that while Kirby may be on top right now, that's a present tense discussion. The future still provides an opportunity for Alabama. Alabama's going to be one of the top ranked teams to begin the season this year. In their mind, they believe they could still win the national championship. And that's obviously, a possibility. That certainly could happen. The Bama fans sort of think that they may be down now, Georgia may be up, but that could all reverse itself over the course of the next 15 games. And not to come across like a pompous blowhard, although I guess from time to time I probably do, not to be pretentious here, but like the Nathaniel Hawthorne quote, the famous writer that families in America are always rising and falling. Well, in college football, I think that's kind of the same way. You've got programs that rise up. LSU won the national championship 2019, haven't been heard from since, at least at the championship level. Clemson's won a couple of titles. They seem down now. Certain teams kind of pop up and then they go down and come back up again. That's just the way it goes. Families rising and falling in America, college football teams, programs, organizations rising and falling there as well. So there is a sense in which that if you're a Georgia fan, you hear Paul Finebaum say what he says there, it's important to note the operative phrase in all that is, this is what's true right now. And so as you look ahead to go for 3-23, the next few months, the next 15 games, the thing of interest to Georgia fans is, well, how is it that you stay there? So I kind of want to park on that here just for a moment and talk about what Kirby Smart and Georgia can do, the mood, the vibe that has to be created to make sure when Paul Finebaum is speaking at SEC Media Days next year, he's still saying the same kind of stuff then that he is now, that Georgia is the unquestioned leader of this sport and that Kirby Smart is the unquestioned top coach in this sport, the way that he's obviously correctly, I think, stating right now. And this is where you kind of get back into what's been a little bit of a hot topic for us this week, the idea of complacency and how Georgia fights against that. And on media days when Georgia was there on Tuesday, I thought Kirby Smart made a very interesting comment in terms of what is at stake for Georgia. Obviously, you can't deny the fact that the go for 3-23, third straight national championship is a possibility for UGA. That's obviously a stated goal here. And, Kirby talked about the way in which they're kind of talking to the team about this, going back and looking throughout history, and maybe one team in particular that means a lot to us who are of a certain age, who lived through this in kind of our glory years. Kirby Smart saying we reach back to that portion of the sporting past as a way of talking to our team right now. Let me let you hear Kirby, and that sets us up for what we want to say today. Here's Kirby Smart on the message to the team about a third straight national championship.
We've certainly looked at some three-peat scenarios of teams like the Bulls and different sports teams that they might actually know about. No offense to the Minnesota 1935 team, but I don't know if it's going to resonate with my audience. So we're going to try to, I don't care about the three-peat, the two-peat, or the one-peat. I care about complacency. And if the focus is on that and outcomes, I think the rest will take care of itself in terms of allowing our guys to focus on being the best they can be.
Let me give you a brief aside just for a moment. I actually like the fact that Kirby thinks his players know about the Michael Jordan era Chicago Bulls because obviously they weren't alive for it. But you always sort of hope that Georgia's pursuing a special brand of player, someone who's not just physically dominant but also put together well from a mental standpoint there as well, from a I guess a spiritual standpoint. The idea that these players have kind of acquainted themselves with an important part of sports history that they weren't alive to experience. The true GOAT himself, Michael Jordan, the Jordan era Chicago Bulls, kind of actually makes me feel pretty good about Georgia players, that they are as acquainted with the Jordan era, and maybe a lot of that's through The Last Dance, but as acquainted with the Jordan era as Kirby Smart says they are. That kind of makes me feel pretty good about the future of this Georgia program if they know Jordan that well, even because obviously Jordan's now a good number of years ago. But if we take that seriously here for a moment, Kirby's saying, hey, it's a Michael Jordan, pair of three-peats as a member of the Chicago Bulls. That's more relevant for our team than whatever Minnesota's football team may have done way back in the 1930s. I think it's important to think about, okay, well, what was it that Jordan and the Bulls, if you've cared about basketball at all, if you remember that era at all, what was it that Jordan and the Bulls did to be able to win 3 straight NBA titles, world championships, and then actually come back and have another three-peat after that once Jordan returned to the sport? How is it they're able to get that done? And if you go back and watch like The Last Dance, now many of us lived through this. We have, very vivid memories of this. But if you reacquainted yourself with this era because of The Last Dance, that series of documentaries that came out, back during the pandemic, what is that Jordan was this tenacious competitor. And frankly, I think a lot of his teammates would say was not always all that much fun to play with. That Jordan demanded so much from his teammates and himself pushed himself so much that it's not like everybody was always having a lot of fun playing for the Chicago Bulls, but they were having a great deal of satisfaction once the season was over because they were making history and winning championships and doing all of those things. And so when Kirby mentioned that about the Bulls this week and that being a little bit of a template for, what Georgia's about to go through, I have to admit I was kind of wondering, does that mean that Georgia's going to take on sort of a Chicago Bulls-style mindset as it approaches what awaits at the next 15 games here? And to kind of bolster this point a little bit further, I thought that Dallas Turner, the terrific pass rusher for Alabama, I thought he had a very interesting quote at Media Days of the day. I'm not an Alabama fan, but even I can admit when something's kind of funny. And this was kind of funny from Dallas Turner about the way in which Alabama fans kind of want to get back to playing the brand of football they enjoy. It's a very specific phrase. Turner seemed to like it, and it kind of goes along with what we're talking about right now. This is what Dallas Turner, the great pass rusher from Alabama, said his goal for the Crimson Tide is here this season.
A lot of fans have been looking for Alabama to get back to, joyless murder ball, as they call it. How do you see the team getting back to that this upcoming season?
I mean, the expectations is joyless murder ball for the season, of course. But, it's a lot of guys on the defense that can run around, fly around, and make good plays.
So, as I said before, the phrase joyless murder ball is just kind of funny. I think that's kind of interesting. And if that is Alabama's goal here this year, Paul Finebaum told us a moment ago that whatever Alabama's methods and goals are, that Georgia's actually perfected all of that. And so it kind of dovetails back to the Michael Jordan thing a moment ago. Is the only way to go out and win this 3rd straight championship, is the only way to do that to have that sort of joyless pursuit that Dallas Turner says he wants Alabama to have, and that some of us would say we saw from Michael Jordan, where not everybody always loved playing with him, but everybody that did play with him went on to have great success because he wouldn't expect anything less from his teammates than that. Is that the only way for Georgia to get it done here this season and go for 3 in 2023? Do you have to have that Michael Jordan style tenacity in order to be able to get this done? Well, I asked that question to Terrence Edwards, the great former Georgia wide receiver, on the show yesterday. Terrence is a big basketball fan. He knows the Jordan era with the Bulls as well as anybody could. He also knows what it feels like to be in locker rooms like the one that Georgia has right now. I asked him about that. Do you got to be the Jordan type guy here? Do you have to be that tenacious? Do you have to be that relentless? Do you have to be that, frankly, joyless? Is that the way that it has to be in order to get it done here in 2023? This is what Terrence said about that.
It depends on the individual. I mean, you look at Mike and Kobe, their leadership styles were a little different than LeBron James and Magic Johnson's leadership styles. But you have to know the heartbeat of the team. There's time and place for everything. There's time and place to kind of be that jovial, upbeat, let's go out and have some fun. It's that time to be on the teammate when you feel your teammate is not doing their best. I mean, just look at the Kobe Dean in the national championship game when he got on Channing Tindall for missing an assignment. Then the next play, he was congratulating. So leaders have to figure out what's the heartbeat of the day. And today, each day changes. And so each play changes, each second changes. So the team really have to understand what is the heartbeat of this team, and leaders lead in different ways.
That's why I love having former players like Terrence Edwards on the show, because I think he explains that really well, that sometimes you do have to be the sort of relentless, unforgiving version of Michael Jordan and demand more out of yourself and more out of your teammates. That's sort of what you need. But I don't know that anyone can kind of live with the needle in the red that much for an entire season. I'm not quite so sure it works out that way. And Terrence says, hey, there are going to be those moments when you have to kind of dial some of that back a little bit and, just in order to kind of get through the season, because it can turn into a really long grind. And I guess to sort of sum all this up, let me say it this way. If you've been with us now for a couple of years, I think you'll remember prior to the start of the 2021 season, one of the things I was talking a lot about was the idea that Georgia needed to look like it was having fun. And if Georgia was going to be on its way to great success, then the clue we might get from that is how much fun the games looked like they were to watch. Because there was sort of a stretch, and I hate to say this because we're all Georgia fans, but I think this is just true. In 2019, Georgia football was not always that much fun to watch. They were scuffling against SEC opponents in a way they never should have been. And in 2020, because of the pandemic and everything else, there was a little bit of a haphazard nature to college football that year. And once again, there was just a little something missing from Georgia. It just didn't quite seem as fun as it was supposed to be. And what we kind of called for going into the 2021 season was, if it looks like they're having fun, they probably are. And if they are having fun, they're probably on their way to great success. And that was the recipe to breaking through and winning that first national championship. But that was also 2 national championships ago. Now we're talking about a team trying to go for 3 in 23. So the overall mood, the overall vibe probably is a little different now. That there probably is a certain level of Jordan tenacity required if you want to really achieve at this level, because let's face it, no one in the modern era has ever won 3 straight national championships. It's going to require being a lot different than your competition in order to be able to truly get that done. But the obligation, I think, still remains, as Terrence Edwards pointed out, that when you can still have some fun, you need to try to find a way to do that. And that's why leadership, stuff like Kirby Smart points out is so important, that there's a different mood and a different vibe required at different points in time of the year. Sometimes you have to reach down deep and find something in yourself you're not quite so sure you have. And sometimes it's about sort of relaxing and enjoying your teammates and enjoying the bond that Georgia's worked so hard to develop there as well. There's a reason that Kirby and the players, they talk all about this kind of stuff, all about the right mindset, the right mentality that it takes to approach an upcoming season. And obviously it's not an easy thing to get done, because if it was, it would have been done before now. But if anybody is capable of figuring it out, it would stand to reason it might be these Georgia Bulldogs. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Kroger, and we're glad to have you with us, no matter how you get this today, live on video, starting at 9:45, 1st and 15, DawgNation.com, DawgNation app, 10 a.m. after that, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Lots of video ways to watch our program. You can listen to us on the radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. You can, podcast-wise, we've been on the podcast for a long time. By the way, many of you have kind of pointed this out, and I appreciate that. Today is episode 1993 for our program. We are quickly climbing towards our 2,000th episode. And obviously, we'll probably have a little bit of a celebration for that when we get there, because frankly, 2,000 episodes is something I'm proud of. I don't talk about that kind of stuff a lot just because, I don't know, for whatever reason. It just sort of feels weird to kind of, do that. But I am really, really proud to have been here for 2,000 episodes. Really, really excited about what I hope is another 2,000 more at least, if not many more thousands beyond that. So we're kind of coming up on a big podcast milestone here pretty soon. I'm really excited about that, and we'll, I'm sure, tell you more about that over the course of the next few days. For now, let me tell you about a sponsor who makes these 2,000 episodes possible. It's our friends at Kroger, and tomorrow's a great chance to be a part of, or at least coming up very soon. Is it tomorrow? Yeah, it is tomorrow. Kroger Chef Jr. At Kroger locations around our area here. You can go to the website, Kroger Chef Jr., and find out more about this. It's a guided kids cooking experience. What this works out to be is kids who are interested in the food preparation process, how to be a chef, how to do that kind of stuff. Well, this experience gives them a hands-on approach to learning more about that. This month, the food item being made is the churro tacos. That sounds really good and really fun to me. So tomorrow at select Kroger locations, you can be a part of the Kroger Chef Jr. event cooking those churro tacos. Now, it's just $7 per child, and in addition to cooking the churro tacos, you're also going to get an apron and a patch, a chef's hat, a recipe card and holder, and a taco holder there as well. So I want you to go to the website. It's KrogerChefJr.com. That's the word junior spelled out, Junior. KrogerChefJr.com to find out about where it's taking place, why it's such a fun thing for so many kids to be a part of, and how you can be a part of it tomorrow. Kroger Chef Jr. at select Kroger locations. And while I have your attention on Kroger, let me also mention ongoing right now our Celebrate Outstanding Teachers contest with our friends at Kroger. Now, this is a really cool thing because we're coming up on the start of school season, and obviously teachers getting ready for all of that. Well, we want to do something to help a few great teachers get ready for the upcoming season as well. A handful of great teachers are going to win a incredible collection of 4 gift cards here, courtesy of our friends at Kroger. Obviously, it's the $100 gift card to Kroger, but also $50 to Target and Home Chef and Bath and Body Works. So a great collection of gift cards that are going to be going out to our teachers, and we'll be announcing the winners of our Outstanding Teachers Contest the week of August the 7th. We're going to be doing that. But in addition to that, here's something you need to know, that you can also be a winner just for nominating a teacher there as well. So if you go to DawgNation.com, it's easy to find the link. Click there, nominate a great teacher. Maybe that teacher will win, but you yourself, for being the nominator, can also win there as well. You may get a $50 gift card from Kroger and a DawgNation gift bag, which includes T-shirt, all kinds of cool stuff there as well. So that could be coming your way there as well. So you have for a few more days to kind of get in on that nomination process. Tell us about a great teacher that you know, whether it's your teacher, your child's teacher, teacher in your family, teacher in your community. And that teacher could be one of our big winners starting the week of August the 7th. And you yourself could be a winner for making that nomination. Go to DawgNation.com for more details on that. All right, we have a fun conversation here coming up in a moment. Speaking of former players being on the show, we welcome in the former Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm to the program today. No Jeff Sintel. Jeff's still on vacation. We'll look forward to catching up with Jeff again very, very soon. But it is Jake Fromm here today, and we're going to do something a little bit different with Jake than we sometimes do. We are still going to talk plenty of Georgia football. Obviously, that's what we kind of lean on Jake for when he's on our program, and he has been every week now for the last several months. But in addition to that, as I talk to Jake, in full disclosure, we're recording the show live today, but I did record the interview with Jake on Thursday afternoon because he was driving back up to D.C. to be a part of the Washington Commanders, start of training camp. He's going to be a part of that. Obviously, we wish him well as he does that. And we kind of got more into some of that kind of stuff. You know, what a training camp truly feels like, how much of the stuff you see on Hard Knocks is real life, and the differences between the NFL and college when it comes to some of this. It's a pretty interesting conversation with Jake Fromm about the work that he's doing to further his football career and be a part of that Washington Commanders organization here this year. So I enjoyed talking to Jake about some of the stuff involving his career right now. And obviously, we also talked to him plenty about what's going on with Georgia football there as well. We'll do that with Jake Fromm here coming up in a couple of minutes. Prior to that, though, let's go around the DawgHouse. And it's poured today by our friends at the Finish Long Drink. And one of the topics around DawgNation here a little bit over the course of the last couple of years has been the Georgia offensive line and the hesitancy seemingly to give Georgia the full credit it deserves for the dominant performance of the Georgia offensive line. One of the main ways this has shown up is the fact that Georgia has not won the Joe Moore Award, the award that goes out to the nation's top offensive line, in either of the last 2 years. Georgia, Cedric Von Prawn told us this a year ago. That was their stated goal for this past season in 2022. They still finished second, apparently, to the team that apparently is just unbeatable. The team that apparently has the best offensive line in the history of offensive lines is apparently the Michigan Wolverines. Mighty Michigan, as we've sort of taken a column around here because of the praise they're constantly heaped on. Apparently, they're just unstoppable. And the offensive line apparently is what makes them unstoppable. The Joe Moore Award certainly seems to believe that. Georgia has finished no better than second in either of the last 2 years. And you may remember, one of the guys that's kind of involved in the Joe Moore Award selection process, Cole Kubelik from the SEC Network, at the time, he was kind of explaining why it was that Michigan's offensive line is just apparently, in the view of the Joe Moore Award voters, just so much better than Georgia's. This doesn't hold up very well, I don't believe, with UGA fans. But this is the explanation that Cole Kubelik tried to give us about that last December. Take a listen.
The way that I looked at it this year is really and truly like just choosing between your favorite flavor of ice cream. Like if you're a chunky kid like me growing up, some people like the flavor of ice cream that was super technical, super fundamental, understanding footwork, hat placement, hand placement, assignment football, working together, shoulder to shoulder, staying square, working up a combination block to the second level. Whereas other people, kind of like me, may enjoy the gladiator style of football just a little bit more. They want to see people be bludgeoned. And it's something that I have, not that I don't appreciate technique and fundamentals, but for me, that's just what I enjoy watching a little bit more. That's where I think Georgia really excelled. Guys 15, 20, 30 yards down the field, tracking the football, finishing blocks. Guys on screen plays, taking corners and linebackers, escorting them to the bench area 5 yards out of bounds, punishing people to the ground, finishing plays. That's what I enjoy watching. I think Georgia embodied that a little bit more than Michigan did this year, but collectively, from start to finish, consistently, the majority of the people who voted for our award decided that Michigan was the better offensive line from start to finish.
Yeah, man, you just can't do anything about that Michigan offensive line. I realize Georgia won the last 2 national championships. Boy, that Michigan offensive line performance just sort of speaks for itself. Now, I play all of that for this reason. I regret to inform those of you who are Georgia fans who are hoping that maybe one day this Georgia offensive line, with first-round picks and great success, that maybe one day this offensive line might get a little bit of credit for the success that it's enjoyed. I regret to inform you that apparently in 2023 that's not likely to be true either. Our friends at Pro Football Focus, not everybody loves Pro Football Focus. I understand Kirby Smart himself has said that he doesn't particularly like Pro Football Focus, but nonetheless they are a voice out there in the wilderness and some of this kind of stuff from time to time. They have provided their rankings of offensive lines for the upcoming season, and once again, the Michigan Wolverines rank atop Georgia. Georgia's the second best offensive line according to Pro Football Focus, and as I'll show you on the screen here, Michigan, once again, according to Pro Football Focus, is the number one offensive line in the country. I got to tell you, this mighty Michigan bunch, they just can't be beaten other than the times they have been beaten, like, say, TCU this past year and Georgia the year before that. But this mighty Michigan team is just a dominant, unstoppable force. And the season is essentially one that belongs to Michigan. The season itself is essentially a referendum on who can even keep it close with Michigan. We've had several media types who've tried to sell us on that. I guess the most prominent maybe being Reese Davis, the host of ESPN's College Game Day, who a few times over the course of the last few months has kind of made no bones about the fact that Michigan, not the team that's been number 2 the last 2, or I should say number 1 the last 2 years, Georgia, but Michigan is his number 1 team. And I guess the Pro Football Focus ranking the offensive line just sort of beefs that up even more. This is what Reese Davis has said in the past.
Michigan has a proven quarterback that I think is going to improve greatly this year. They've got the best cornerback in America in Will Johnson. They've got some transfers on both lines of scrimmage, including a pass rusher that should shore up some of the things that they've lost. They've done a really good job in the transfer portal the last couple of years, particularly on the lines of scrimmage. They've got their running backs coming back, a couple of wide receivers that might even be bigger threats, transfer tight end from Indiana, I believe. I think if I had to fill out the ballot right now based on what I know, the type of production I know I'm going to get, I think I'd put Michigan number 1.
We've played that clip for you before, and there's a lot that could be unpacked from it. For whatever reason, the thing that kind of caught my attention that time is in making the case for Michigan, the litany of things that Reese Davis cited. One of the things that he mentioned was they got this transfer tight end from Indiana. Georgia has maybe the greatest tight end to play college football in decades, and you're selling me on a transfer from Indiana? Like, that's how hard some of these media types are working to make the case for, as we're going to call them, mighty Michigan, unbeatable Michigan, other than the teams that seem to beat them like TCU and obviously Georgia, dragging them up and down the field at the Orange Bowl. Mighty Michigan, number 1 in the eyes of Davis. There have been others as well. Was it Bruce Feldman made the case for Michigan not that long ago there as well? Pro Football Focus, once again, touting the Michigan offensive line. If you're Georgia, I guess I just don't know what you do about this. I guess you're just thankful to be living in Michigan's world. You're thankful to be a tiny moon orbiting the giant sun that is the Michigan Wolverines. I guess that's all you're left to be able to do, and just hope that if Georgia's somehow lucky enough to even earn a game against the Michigan Wolverines, that maybe Georgia can equate itself okay in a situation like that. But we are clearly dealing with an unstoppable juggernaut. Best offensive line in the country, rightly ranked preseason number 1. That is an oncoming train. And if Georgia's even fortunate enough to be on the same field, I hope they are ready for what is coming their way on the basis of everything the media is telling us here about this mighty Michigan team. And that is Around the DawgHouse. It's poured today by our friends at the Finished Long Drink, and after some of that kind of analysis, I could use a Finished Long Drink. But the truth is, I can pretty much enjoy Finished Long Drink anytime, anyway, especially the brand new peach-flavored version of the Finished Long Drink. And that's one of the things I think we're so excited about right now here on Around the DawgHouse is the fact that you've tried the traditional, the blue can, you love that, kind of got the grapefruit flavor, the gin kick. You maybe tried the long drink cranberry. I know a lot of y'all love that long drink strong, 8.5% alcohol by volume. But if you tried the brand new offering, a special thing for a limited time for those of us here in the Peach State, the peach flavor of the Finished Long Drink. This is the kind of thing that sort of takes that summer up a notch. And as you're kind of waiting those final few weeks before tailgate season and all that begins, little Finished Long Drink peach flavor as you're at the pool or the lake or the golf course or wherever it is you got going on here this summer weekend. It's a great thing to take with you. So go to thelongdrink.com, put in your zip code right there. You can find out where you can pick some up today, and you can understand why so many folks love this brand new, relatively new category of beverage, the ready-to-drink cocktail, the mixed drink in a can, and why the peach-flavored version may be the best version of the finished long drink yet. So find them online at thelongdrink.com. All right, so before we are done, I'm going to talk a little bit about the final day of SEC Media Days. And something I think I noticed, I'm not quite so sure anybody else did. We'll tell you about that. And we'll kind of set the stage for, I guess, how Media Days kind of puts a punctuation mark on kind of the final moments of the preseason before the real season actually gets here. So we'll do all of that here coming up in just a little bit. But for now, on everything as it relates to what's going on with Georgia football, of course, the quarterback position in particular, and Jake Fromm's got some really strong stuff on quarterback here today. We'll also talk to Jake as well, as I said before, about his own career and his attempt to compete to be right there in the mix of the Washington Commanders quarterback job. All of that now with Jake Fromm on a Kroger Fresh Take on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger today.
Here's a DawgNation.com insider.
And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger, time for a Kroger Fresh Take with former Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm, who's actually thinking ahead to his near future right now, on his way to begin Washington Commanders training camp. Jake, we appreciate your time, and I guess if you don't mind, let me start there. You know, if you don't mind, we obviously talk to you a lot about what's happening with Georgia football and, you know, kind of what happened when you played for Georgia football. I don't know how much we've talked in the past about your own current career, but obviously you got a big next few weeks ahead of you, getting ready for NFL preseason action, kind of a little bit of a new look for this Commanders organization there as well. Like, what is your mindset as you kind of get back to football here right now and kind of getting back to that grind again?
Hey, Brandon, what's going on? Thanks for having me, man. Excited to be here. Yeah, right. I'm on the road right now, heading to training camp myself. Man, just full of excitement. It's just I mean, you just know mentally kind of what you go into NFL training camp. It's just going to be a grind. It's a little bit longer than college fall camp is, and you know, just the stakes are a little bit higher, maybe a little bit more stressful. But man, it's exciting. It's fun. It's a huge blessing. There's not very many people who get to come in and go to training camp. So, man, I'm just pumped up. I'm excited and trying to earn my spot on the team.
Is it weird for you that I think most of us would say what happens for Georgia during its preseason camp is a pretty big mystery? You know, college teams are very, very secretive. NFL teams, by comparison, are just kind of not. Like, media has a lot more access, typically speaking, to an NFL practice than a college media person might to a college practice. There are fans, I know here in Flowery Branch in Georgia, that are in attendance. I believe it's the same thing, you know, up there with the Commanders organization there as well, where a lot of fans get to come to practice. Is it a little bit different going through an NFL practice where there are just seemingly a lot more people watching practice than sometimes happen at the college level? Is that something that you even notice?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would definitely go kind of along with that notion that NFL camp is a lot more open. I remember talking with some of the guys there at the lunch table before we broke for the summer, and they're bringing in like an entire stadium bleachers for fans, expecting a big turnout of just people kind of there at practice. So, you know, there's probably a lot more moving parts going on, but man, at the end of the day, it's all about what happens on the grass and being able to stay focused on that. And man, knowing that install, going into practice and making sure you make a play and kind of show them what you can do.
The other thing that I think a lot of us sort of feel like we know about NFL training camp is the fact that a lot of us have watched Hard Knocks for a long time. And I think that Hard Knocks does a good job of, you know, giving you kind of an inside view of what it's like trying to make a team, you know, trying to get ready for an upcoming season, all the things that are going on here right now. As someone who's also been through this before and going through this right now, how close do you think a show like Hard Knocks kind of comes towards, you know, getting what it's all about as everybody's fighting for one of these 53 roster spots?
Yeah, I think it does a pretty good job of really getting the whole dynamic. I mean, I don't think you get a whole lot of fakers on the show at all, because I mean, people have to be so wrapped up in what they're doing in order to make the team. Because I mean, I know Coach Smart talks about it. You got to compete, and every spot's open, and all that good stuff. But there's no realer truth to that than NFL training camp, because anything can happen on final cuts, and you really got to go in and be yourself, because you don't have any choice not to, because there's so much going on.
There's a level of mental focus that you have to have right now that's probably different than it's been the last few weeks for you. And so I'm kind of curious, when you look at it from a percentage standpoint, what you kind of think of as your summer, the brief off season you did have, because you were doing some other OTA work, even throughout the summer there as well. Like, what percentage of this has been football for you, and what percentage of this has been trying to get away from football so that I can give my full focus when training camp actually gets here? Like, how would you break down what the last few weeks, last couple of months have kind of been like for you?
Yeah, that's kind of tough. So we broke for OTAs. We got 5 weeks there, kind of off before we come back. And, man, you got to get your body right. You want your body feeling the best it's ever felt going into camp. So I usually kind of dedicate 4 to 5 hours to my body, to throwing, to lifting, to running, all that good stuff, and then really try to, once we get our work in for the day, get back out post lunch, and really just try to enjoy, be where my feet are, spend time with the wife, spend time with my family, get out, go fishing a little bit, play a little round of golf, spend time with friends. So you definitely need to step away a little bit, because man, when you show up for training camp, it is ball, and you're just going to be so wrapped up with it, you can't think about anything else.
Well, it goes without saying, we wish you luck on all of that. Obviously, a lot of Georgia fans rooting for you hard. It becomes a fun reason to watch these Commanders preseason games coming up here in just a couple of weeks. We're not too far away from the start of NFL preseason as far as all that goes. To shift gears here back to Georgia for a moment, obviously we had SEC Media Days this week, and one of the big topics that came up from Kirby Smart is the idea of battling complacency, that sense of not feeling like you've arrived and being just as hungry this year for another championship as Georgia's been for the last 2 years there as well. As someone who's been a player, is a player now, but also at the at the level SEC and Georgia football of having some success and then coming back again, like how real is that there's got to be this kind of team-wide vision of staying just as hungry and just as committed, even though the grind day to day, week to week can obviously be pretty hard. Like, how much of a realization is that the idea of getting complacent and not getting too rested here is an important part of what Georgia's about to go through?
Yeah, I'm going to make a bold take here. Nobody does a better job, in my opinion. Gosh, I mean, throughout the country maybe, than Coach Smart does in messaging and in getting his team to buy into what he's selling. It starts during the winter workouts, during spring ball. Buy-in really happens during camp, and getting all those guys. We got 85 guys on scholarship, and the walk-ons who we're going to help out the team in the fall to really buy in to what the team messaging is, to the team culture. I thought he did a great job at SEC Media Days of doing that, and he's just being him. Honestly, he does a great job, man. Guys feed off the energy that he has. And just what he's selling. And he does such a good job with messaging that he gets the fan base on board with it as well.
Yeah.
So that's how good he is at it. It's going to be a great fall camp for him if they can get all their guys bought in.
Well, what I've said before is some of that could come across like a little bit boring. Like you said, for the average fan, they may not care as much about that. But I think that people lean in more on that. Maybe the players do themselves, because it seems like something that Kirby kind of deeply believes. I mean, you hear Brock Bowers talk this week, or some of the other Georgia players that were there, Kamari Laster, Cedric Von Pron, Granger, they reflect all this too, but it's not like this rote memorization where they're just sort of parroting back what they've heard. It seems like this team takes that pretty seriously, and fans want Georgia to win. So if this is what the players and the coaching staff believe is important for winning, then it seems like it gets pretty easy for the fans to get on board with that there as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to Coach Smart. Therefore, it's going to be important for the position coaches, the coordinators, the strength staff, the support staff. I mean, you got everybody in that building who's preaching the same message over and over and over again. So it gets ingrained in their brain because it becomes part of them, and just throughout what they do day to day, coming in and lifting and grinding. So, a different kind of perspective too is Coach Sinclair with the strength staff they got. I mean, really, they're they're an arm, a hand extension of Coach Smart, because they end up spending the most time with the kids during the summer and during the summer workouts. So nobody does a better job of really getting all those guys on the same page than Coach Sinclair does. So, man, I'm pumped and excited for him, and really it's just kind of just a realness eking out from those guys when they speak.
I want to finish with a question about quarterbacks. Let me remind folks before we get there, this is our Kroger Fresh Take with former Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger here today. And, of course, as you head towards the weekend, now listen, Jake's weekend's devoted towards football. He's starting NFL training camp, and he's getting serious. But for the rest of us, maybe our summer's still going on here a bit, and we get grilling out season and hanging out by the lake or the pool, whatever else. And as you're putting some food on that grill or having some great side items to go along with those burgers and dogs or steaks or ribs or anything else, don't forget your local Kroger's the place to go to get stocked up on all of that. The plates, the napkins, the side dishes, the great meat to put on the grill itself, perhaps, maybe even all of that at your local Kroger. Great savings and all that, too. So stop by and see them in store or go online, Kroger.com. They got you covered on all of that. Jake, to finish up our conversation here today, Kirby pretty much said about quarterback what you'd expect for him to say, which is that maybe Carson Beck begins the summer period kind of slightly ahead here, but obviously that's not a settled situation in Kirby's mind. There's still a competition ongoing. We're not surprised to hear Kirby obviously address that, but from someone who kind of began a training camp as a backup and eventually became a starter, and to a guy who also was a starter and held on to that job and kind of, final year at Georgia where, you were really kind of the guy from the full time there. What's it like for these quarterbacks now getting ready to start practice? And I guess, for Carson, who may be ahead, for guys like Brock and Gunner who want to kind of close some ground up here, what's the message to these quarterbacks right now about what the next few weeks are supposed to be like?
Yeah, it's about to get real for those guys, man. It's about coming in, competing. And I think what the rest of the team wants to see is a guy who's going to be consistent, compete every day, and really take the bull by the horns and be a great leader for this team throughout camp, man. Camp's tough. It's a grind. Man, I didn't want to see the same guy in and out of the huddle every single day. So, as far as the competition going on, Carson wasn't there at SEC Media Days. So, maybe it might be slightly more open than we might think.
Interesting thought there, Jake. I certainly appreciate your time. Thank you for being here on our Kroger Fresh Take today. Certainly enjoy this beginning of training camp up there. For the Washington Commanders, we'll be rooting for you hard, and we'll look forward to getting a chance to talk to you very, very soon there as well.
Yes, sir. Look forward to it. Thank you, Brandon.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
There we go. I think that I have said this before, but I am fascinated by, the battle for positioning when it comes to these NFL roster spots. I'm a lot more into college football than I am in the NFL. I've never made any bones about that. But the stuff that Hard Knocks shows, I'm really interested in. And the stuff that Jake Fromm's talking about there, of being at my best, going out there, giving my best shot, kind of a wide open opportunity there at the quarterback spot and a chance to really kind of move up that depth chart with a really good summer here, moving into the NFL preseason time. I just think that stuff's really, really fascinating. It's the same thing for the guys that just left the Georgia roster as well. It's get all the first round picks and they're going to have their time to do whatever. But it's also, guys who maybe weren't as highly drafted who are also going to have a chance to impress during their training camps, during that preseason time. There's just something really, I guess, inspiring, maybe that's the right word, something really inspiring about the way in which guys commit themselves to doing that, which I think makes football this time of year really very fun. Something else that, of course, is very, very fun is the chance to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean, and being excited about the DawgNation cruise coming up April of 2024. And when we were planning that new DawgNation cruise, there were two things that I knew we needed to do. First of all, I really stood on the table to say, we got to go back to Perfect Day Coco Cay. Any cruise that I'm taking, I'm sort of thinking about Perfect Day Coco Cay, the exclusive private island experience that you get only on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. That has to be a part of what we do, and that is going to be a part of all of this once again in 2024, as well as a stop with Nassau in the Bahamas there too. But also, we knew we wanted to be bigger and better than it had ever been before there as well. And that's what it's about, being on board Allure of the Seas. This is an Oasis-class ship, and if you're not all that familiar with the line of ships in the Royal Caribbean fleet, you got to understand something. The Oasis-class ships are right now the largest ships at sea. And so when you talk about being on a cruise ship like this, you're experiencing all the specialty restaurants, all kinds of bars and lounges, the entertainment options, unlike really anything that can be matched anywhere else. And that's what the Dog Nation crew is going to be all about there as well. And, of course, along with the theme of bigger and better, that means more Dog Nation themed events there as well. Some of these are only rumors at this point in time. Can't even really tell you about them, but it is going down in a big way in April of 2024. So give Jessica Slater a call. She's a great travel agent. She's helped me with so many cruise vacations, and she can help you there as well. In fact, she's helped a lot of you there, too. You've told me that yourself. So you can call her 770-718-9147, 770-718-9147. Tell her I said hello when you talk to her. You can also go online, royaldogs.com. That is royaldogs.com. And she's got you covered on all that today. The website, royaldogs.com, is specifically for information about the 2024 version of the Dog Nation Cruise. All right, let's talk SEC Media Days wrap-up here for a moment. I imagine by the time I'm off the air today, we'll get that official announcement from the SEC, order of finish, predicted league champion, the all-SEC preseason teams. Probably won't get that before the podcast is done, but we'll probably get that by the time we're off on video, if I had to guess. But there were a couple of thoughts on the final day of SEC Media Days that I kind of found to be a little bit interesting. One of those is this. The vibe on the last day is always a little bit weird. I was joking with our video audience before our show began today. I like baseball cards. Sometimes I take my son to like baseball card shows, things like that. The last day of a baseball card show is always sort of the weirdest day because people are ready to go home. The vendors are packing up. Everybody's trying to get out the door. They've been there for a few days. And there's a little bit of a SEC Media Days vibe that way, too, where a lot of energy in the room on a Monday or Tuesday. But by Thursday, people have sort of worn all their clothes. The media types are sort of kind of going back around to something they've already worn once before. And, you know, everybody's a little sleepy. Everybody's kind of ready to go home. So it's hard to make news in the last day of Media Days the same way you can the first couple of days of the week. The energy level's just not quite as high. So keep that in mind for what I'm about to tell you. But I thought it was really weird that a guy like Josh Heupel, the Tennessee coach, by my best recollection, really didn't have any kind of viral moments or interesting quotes yesterday. There was almost nothing from Heupel yesterday that cut through the clutter at all, the best that I can possibly tell. I think this is also sort of true for Billy Napier, but for now I'm going to make this case more about Josh Heupel. And to me, that's a little bit noticeable. I mean, even compared to like Shane Beamer, a coach who was also there yesterday, I felt like there was a little bit more coverage and a little bit more reaction to some of the things that Shane Beamer said than there was to what Josh Heupel said, which I don't want to make, media reaction to Media Days to be more than it is, certainly. But it is worth kind of keeping in mind here is that Vols fans have this hope right now that Josh Heupel is the next big thing in the SEC. After all, had kind of a breakthrough season a year ago. I say kind of a breakthrough season because while they did beat Alabama, they didn't really do much after beating Alabama. And, the season kind of ends on a little bit of a down note there. But at one point in time, this was the number one team in the college football playoff rankings. And Josh Heupel, certainly the offensive system that he had put in place there was a big reason why that was true. But I think in events like this, when all the other SEC coaches have their turn at bat, you just see a difference between the guys sort of at the top. And I'm not just talking about Kirby Smart, and I'm not just talking about Nick Saban. Like, to me, Brian Kelly had some gravitas when he walked in the room there on Monday. Kind of looked good in the suit, presented himself pretty well, and I think people were just kind of leaning in to a little bit of what Kelly had to say. And it seems like some of the words that Kelly chose to use kind of got a little bit more attention. Was that because it was just earlier in the week? Maybe that's a chance. Maybe there's a chance that's true. But there's an element to which that Josh Heupel is not exactly standing out from the crowd in the SEC right now. And if I'm a Vols fan, I'd be paying close attention to that. Certainly a guy that got way more attention than Heupel yesterday was Ole Miss coach Lane Kiffin, ironically a former Tennessee head coach. And look, I don't mind telling you, I don't think we have photos or video of this to show you, but it's not hard to find yourself. I thought Kiffin looked like a mess there yesterday. Kiffin's never been particularly well-dressed, I don't think, even going back to his time as Tennessee coach. He always sort of looked like he's wearing his daddy's suit, like a little bit too big for him. He's always going to have that look. Yesterday, though, it's the jacket, no tie. Hair was sort of a disheveled mess. He looked like a guy who'd been playing blackjack for 12 hours as opposed to an SEC head coach there to make a presentation about his team. And once again, I don't want to make SEC Media Days more than it is, but it is a chance to put sort of your best professional foot forward. And I don't think Lane Kiffin necessarily did that. Not just the appearance, although I thought the appearance was greatly lacking for someone who's supposed to be a respected leader of an organization. I think that sharp dress sharpens the mind, and something less than that is probably a little too much less. But even the stuff that Kiffin said, and admittedly I've been accused before of being a little too hard on Lane Kiffin from time to time. I certainly wear that and understand that that's a criticism that might be fair, because there's a lot about Lane that I don't like. I think that Lane Kiffin, to use a phrase that's become popular as of late, he is truly college football's version of an Epo baby. I mean, this is a guy who was Monty Kiffin's son, kind of used that last name to get on the USC staff and then get to Raiders head coach, sort of weirdly hired by Al Davis, one of the many weird things that Davis would have done. Parlayed that to become Tennessee coach at a time in which the Tennessee program was also pretty weird. It seems like that's been true a lot over the last decade plus. That was kind of a weird era there. Then he weirdly left, went to USC. So the resume is as long as a yardstick, right? A lot of big jobs. Kiffin's very good at getting hired places. But the actual tangible accomplishments are actually pretty thin. This is a guy who just sort of seems to be protected by the status he's enjoyed by being and growing up in the football fraternity. And he's really done very little to earn the status that he's been given. And in the midst of a media day's presentation like yesterday, boy, it seems like you heard a lot of excuses. Can't get elite talent anymore because programs X, Y, and Z, they're buying all the top players. And if I'm an Ole Miss fan, this does not set well with me. Now, frankly, I don't think that a lot of things about Kiffin were sitting very well with Ole Miss fans at the end of last season. He clearly seemed to have one eye on something other than coaching his team there with the Rebels. But when you're talking about NIL, and I know some of the media types want to kind of portray Kiffin as a brave truth teller, somebody willing to tell it like it is at a time in which there's confusion around the sport. Frankly, the media has always been quite willing to prop up Lane Kiffin because Lane Kiffin grants them what essentially looks to be unfettered access. Kiffin picks up the phone every time they call. There is nothing some of these media types like more than that. And in exchange for that access, they are more than happy to give him favorable coverage. We've seen that play out now for a number of years as it relates to Kiffin. But once again, to kind of circle back to the fans here, the key stakeholders in the Ole Miss program, when Kiffin's talking about all the reasons why teams like Ole Miss, the team that he coaches, can't get great talent, it just sort of starts to feel like an excuse after a while. It's one of those things that Kiffin seems to sort of turn on and off whenever he wants to. Out of one side of his mouth, he may brag about the transfer to the SIP and be the portal king type guy. He seems to like his ability to get players out of the transfer portal. But on the other side of all of this, essentially kind of makes an excuse for why high school football recruiting is not even worth his time. The truth is, Kiffin's never been a very good recruiter. Now it seems like he thinks he has an excuse not to participate in that process at all. Well, good luck doing that if you want to be a successful coach. No one ever calls Kiffin out on this kind of stuff because I think the media thinks he's interesting and therefore they give him a free pass. Hard not to notice yesterday, though, at least to me, how he looked, how he sounded. Kiffin did not come across as a very professional SEC coach, and I'm guessing some Ole Miss fans may have paid attention to that. We'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And as we wrap up a fun week around here, let me do so in style with a couple of really good golden shoes. We'll throw the first one up on the screen here for a moment. A couple of great submissions I got sent to me. This is our buddy Wise Dog, who was a part of our DawgNation cruise back in April. Some of y'all know him from Twitter there as well. He has been on a Royal Caribbean cruise here this week and sent me a nice picture of a good-looking plate of, it looks like chips and salsa there from Perfect Day, Coco K. I told him, I said, I wish I was there right now. How much fun does that look? Beautiful paradise all around you. Private island right there in the Bahamas. Great food, great beverage, or 2 or 3 or however many you want there. And just having a really good time with all that. We're glad that Wise Dog is enjoying himself. And for all of you who have taken some Royal Caribbean cruise vacations this summer, we're glad to hear all of you enjoying all of those. And as well, our buddy Joel Sidney Kelly sent this to me. He sent it as a GIF. I'm showing it to you as a still shot here. He calls it Crying Day. You got Crying Jordan, kind of referencing back to Michael Jordan early in the show. The Crying Jordan face on Ryan Day. Truly a very funny thing indeed. We never get tired of that. I guess if you wanted to be more accurate, you want to do the Crying Jordan face, but then you got to superimpose Ryan Day's unnaturally black beard on top of Michael Jordan there, the beard for Ryan Day that was sort of chemically enhanced, we believe. No one's beard is as naturally dark as Ryan Day's beard is. So maybe you need to come back and do the Ryan Day beard on top of Michael Jordan, the crying Jordan face there. Either way, pretty good job by Joel Sidney Kelly. Very, very funny stuff. And we'll call those our golden shoes for today, and we'll let you know as we do our Gator Hater countdown. We have now crossed over the Rubicon. Now inside of 100 days, 99 days away from Georgia, Florida. That is our Gator Hater countdown, and that is good news because that means the season itself is here before you know it there as well. You'll have a great weekend. We'll see you back here Monday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We'll look forward to talking to you then. And on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. Showing up on time, doing the work that's promised, for the price that's promised. You can trust R.S. Andrews on all of that. All right, I want to get your comments here for a couple of minutes. And I'm on the DawgNation homepage first, and so we'll start there. Cam Hasty says, I'm not sure I'm clear on this. How do you truly feel about Lane Kiffin? By the way, happy birthday to Billy Napier today. How about that? Another guy who made very little impact in SEC media days. So it's Napier's birthday today. Clearly, Billy Napier does not have the same access to the ink that Ryan Day puts on his beard. Although I'm going to give Napier credit there for being willing to go natural. No issue there on that. So birthday for Mr. Napier. But yeah, to go back to what Cam Hasty said, how I truly feel about Lane Kiffin, there's just a certain aspect of the Kiffin stuff that rubs me the wrong way. I don't like unearned success. I don't like people who kind of get in the club and are protected. You know, here's what you see in college football, on a kind of a normal basis. That college football is the coaching ranks of college football. It is a hierarchy based on competency. And you climb the ladder based on your competency, and you fall down the ladder based on your competency. And we don't really see the bottom end of the coaching ladder very much because that's just teams and coaches we don't really care that much about. But, y'all, there are people who fall out of coaching every single year and can't get back in. I mean, this is a competitive environment. There are way more people who want to be football coaches than there are spaces for them. And so, therefore, we see people at the bottom rung of the college football coaching ladder who fall out of the profession and then can't get back in. This is a hierarchy based on competency. You do well, you move up. You do poorly, you move out. And yet there occasionally are going to be a few guys, and I'm not saying that Lane Kiffin's unworthy of employment. I'm not. I'm saying there's a certain status he seems to enjoy, protected, insulated from the kind of typical ups and downs of the coaching ranks other coaches seem to kind of deal with. And so from that standpoint, that's some of the reason why I like to kind of, I guess, point out certain things about Kiffin, because he seems fairly well insulated from the sort of typical evaluation that some coaches deal with. Jacob Yarbrough says if I'm maybe long overdue, but if I'm picking out a breakout star on this year's team, I'm going with Dylan Bell, especially if Beck wins the quarterback one job. Yeah, I mean, I think that Bell provides an interesting, element to the Georgia wide receiver situation in that, Georgia, I think, has done a pretty good job of creating a lot of different kinds of receivers. You've got a guy like Arian Smith, assuming he's fully healthy. Right now he is. And that's your blazing speedster. You've got a guy like, Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, who you might describe as your crisp route runner. There's every kind of receiver that you could have. Dominic Lovett, I would say, kind of that classic, kind of underneath slot style receiver. And in the case of Dylan Bell, this is your, to me, and I'm probably oversimplifying things, but this is your sort of basketball style post-up guy, the guy that uses his body and obviously being the strongest, guy in the battle when it's wide receiver versus defensive back can be of great value. And Bell is just a strong, beefy dude. That's another playing personality that Georgia sort of has in that wide receiver situation, and I think that's a good thing. Let's see what else. Low Country Dog asked an interesting question: whether or not Billy Napier may have grown up as a UGA fan, considering the fact that he was born in Chatsport. That's a good question. I've never really heard that. That's a good question. Maybe worth asking. Let's see what else. By the way, Cam Hasty giving a happy birthday to Sling Blade. Very funny. DT mentioning still storming there in Pickens County. Oh, we had bad storms yesterday. I had a big tree come down in my backyard, very big tree. It's really pretty scary. Bad storms again this morning there too. It was rough. It's one of those things where, I'm probably not as attuned to some of the stormy weather sometimes as it should be. And I looked out the window yesterday afternoon. I was trying to get some work done. Looked out there, and it's just trees were just rocking back and forth. And then pretty big one came down. It's scary. Scary. Brandon Griffin says NFL rookie Jordan Addison clocked 140 mile per hour in a 55. Got a speeding ticket. Oh, I don't know about that. Did not get a ticket. I don't know. So there you go. DT says it's loud when big trees come down. Normally it is. I didn't hear this tree yesterday. It was really weird. I didn't hear the tree come down. It kind of fell on a creek bed a little bit. So I don't know if that muted the sound a little bit. That there wasn't enough hard ground for it to thump on, or what. But it was I went outside because there had been all kinds of wind blowing. I just wanted to see, what was going on, and I saw the tree down. But I'm like you, I've heard trees fall before, and that thump they make is boom, it's loud. But I did not hear this tree come down, but it came down. It came down. Matt Rukavina says, here's a hot take for the season. Kentucky comes to Athens 5-0 and overrated because their schedule's terrible. And Tennessee has 2 losses by the time we come to town. Yeah, I don't really foresee a situation in which Tennessee doesn't have at least 2 losses by the time they play Georgia. I think you're probably right about that. And, I just think it's hard to build on the success that Tennessee had last year because this was a better season they'd had in quite some time. Hard to build on that success. They're going on the road to Alabama. I think teams like South Carolina and Texas A&M could be, tough opponents there as well. Even a game that kind of flies under the radar, because we're sort of expecting Florida to not be a very good team, but Florida hosts Tennessee relatively early in the year, and Florida's not a huge underdog in that game. They're a slight underdog. They're not a huge underdog in that game there in the Swamp. So, the issue that Tennessee's going to run into is, by expectation, it's supposed to win a lot of games, good number of games, but a lot of the actual per-game projections don't favor Tennessee by a wide margin. That could really get you in some trouble. Let's see what else. DT also talking about the tree again. Jeff Passan, the baseball writer, he broke his back because of a tree falling. Some of y'all may know who Passan is, kind of reports on Major League Baseball for ESPN. He broke his back. A tree fell on him, so it's scary. Let me go to Facebook here for a moment. Zach Adams says the Bama fans are high on Lane Kiffin becoming the next head coach there when Nick Saban is gone. Yeah, I guess there's been some chatter about that, and maybe that's what Lane Kiffin hopes to be able to do. Who knows? Randy Hall says high school football is going to be really fun this season. Riley going to be really connecting with KJ Bolden. Already seen some video to that effect. I do believe that's going to be a lot of fun. Let's see what else. George Herndon on Dan Jackson. Yeah, my understanding is Jackson's fully healthy again. So that's a guy competing for playing time in that Georgia secondary here right now. Let's see what else. Johnny Prescott says Nick Saban, quote, loves Tommy Rees, but never showed any of that love for Lane Kiffin. See, I think that the actual truth is that Kiffin and Saban are actually pretty close. And I think for most of the time that Kiffin and Saban were together, I think that Saban was very happy with Lane Kiffin, even though Kiffin was always kind of probably – I think some of the stuff that Kiffin would have said about Saban getting on to him, some of that was kind of put on and for show a little bit. I think that Saban obviously got aggravated with Kiffin at the very end of the 2016 season, made the decision to kind of push him out for the national championship game. So I think that Saban finally got aggravated. Kiffin wore out his welcome, there at the very end of his run there. But I mean, Kiffin and Saban still seem to be pretty close. I get the overall point that you're making, but I do think that Saban and Kiffin are maybe a little closer than that. Let's see what else. Eric DeVornsey says that Nick Saban saved Lane Kiffin's coaching career. Yeah, certainly it was a strong rehabilitation effort for him that worked out pretty well. William Camacho checking in from the VA in Decatur. William, we're so glad to have you here, as we always are. Thank you for your time on the show today. Randy asking about some offensive packages for KJ Bolden. If I had to guess, probably not. I mean, they didn't really do that for Malachi Starks, and I think that maybe, Randy's kind of a Buford guy, so he may disagree with this. I think that Malachi was probably a better offensive player in high school than what I think that KJ Bolden is right now. And they haven't done that yet for Starks. That would sort of lead me to believe that KJ will be defense only, I believe. Miriam Corbin says lame kitten tries too hard. He seems like an imposter. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, the one thing that we know Lane Kiffin is he's a terrific play caller. You can't deny that. It's some of the elements of taking on the sort of full-fledged leadership role of being a head coach that he's had a little bit of an issue with. That's where he's kind of run into trouble from time to time. John Adams asking me what would it take for me to change my name to a sponsor. I think it'd take a lot. I'm not saying there's nothing I would do, but I think it might take a lot. Like one of these days, I may be like a NASCAR driver, even like the PGA Tour guys like this now, where it's like you get the one sponsor on the kind of the chest, you got another one on the sleeve. I may have to start wearing a hat because it's got to have room for 3 different sponsors. You never know. Nature Gator asking what negatives we're going to be promoting about Billy Napier on Monday's show. I don't know, Nature. Probably not a ton yet. I mean, the thing that actually disappoints me is that Billy Napier hasn't really been relevant enough to get talked about on this show very much. I mean, I've actually lost a fairly, I guess, fertile ground of content. Dan Mullen, you could always count on him to do something dumb. Fans kind of cared about Mullen. You got a kind of a good response from that. That was easy content in the offseason a couple of years ago. Just drag out the dumbest thing that Dan Mullen recently said. Problem is Billy Napier went to media days this week, much like Josh Heupel. He didn't say one thing of note the entire time he was there. He didn't get one bit of attention the entire time he was there either. So I don't want Florida to be good, but gosh, it'd make the show a lot easier to do if Billy Napier was a little bit more relevant than he is now. I mean, most football fans couldn't pick him out of a lineup. So maybe that changes here this year and he can become a little bit of a villain for us. Like we've had to sort of adopt Ryan Day as a little bit of a show villain because, our typical villains like the Florida head coach just aren't quite well enough to get us there. So that's kind of how that goes. Foster Moss says it's hard to hear a tree fall in your backyard when you live in a mansion. If only that were so. Scott Pete says, what's the odds on somebody upsetting us here this year? Here is where the math part gets really tricky. Now, I'm not very smart. Many of you are aware of that. But, you can obviously study on this kind of stuff. So if Georgia has a 90% chance, and they have slightly less than a 90% chance, I think, on paper in the Tennessee game, according to the math nerds. But let's just sort of round it off and make it, because in some games they have more, some games they have less. Let's just round it off and say that Georgia's got a 90% chance of winning every regular season game it plays. The weird thing about math is that does not equate to a 90% chance of going undefeated. That the overall odds of a team winning 12 times in a row when they have a 90% certainty of winning is only about 50%, I'm thinking. Now, you may say, well, on paper, my own eyes tell me that Georgia's got a much better chance than 50% of going undefeated. But math is just sort of weird on that. And in fact, this is one of the things that I do think, like ESPN FPI, the Football Power Index, things like that can be somewhat interesting at looking at sometimes, is that you just sort of remember is that we have a tendency to assume that things are a lot more certain sometimes than they appear to be. This is the warning signal I've been trying to, put out there a good bit, which is that the biggest threat to Georgia is not Michigan, who we joked about earlier, or Ohio State, who, is still making excuses for last year's game, or even Alabama or LSU. The biggest threat to Georgia is this mystery box, this unknown commodity that could come up out of nowhere, the way that Missouri almost did a year ago, is that even with Georgia being an overwhelming favorite in every game, college football is just this sport that sort of shows you that weird things can kind of happen. So if Georgia does go 12-0, and I believe that it will, but if Georgia does go 12-0, that's not really a sort of ho-hum thing to say, well, what else did you expect? Because, the math people will tell you that we have a tendency to sometimes think certain things in college football are easier than they actually are. So who am I to say what the correct percentage is? But the actual math folks will tell you it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 50%. Frank Patterson said the one thing that Josh Heupel did say at Media Days was that Tennessee was the only real shade of orange and that Tennessee was the real UT. So there you go. There you go. So I felt like when it was all said and done, there was more Texas-Oklahoma talk than I would have preferred, but maybe not quite the dominant thing that maybe it could have been. But, boy, didn't you feel like there were just questions on Texas and Oklahoma and every one of these press conferences? Some of that maybe have been coming from, Texas and Oklahoma-centric media who were there just sort of try to get something out of the experience. But, that's an example of the fact that the Texas-Oklahoma stuff was fairly present, although thankfully not the dominant thing from the week. Let's see what else. Spencer Clark says, never underestimate your opponent. I like that. Paul Moon says, winners don't make excuses. The way I always kind of say that is winners aren't whiners. It would be very easy for UGA fans to do that. Tyler Simmons, but the game is over. We lost. I moved on years ago. Yeah, and listen, I don't fault fans for doing whatever. I mean, fans are not professional communicators, right, for the most part. So, have you heard plenty of Georgia fans talking about Tyler Simmons over the years? Of course you have. Have you heard Kirby Smart talking about Tyler Simmons over the course of years? You definitely have not. He didn't even do that night. And that's the thing is that I've said this to y'all before, and I'm not sure it quite resonates the way that I want it to. Kirby Smart has always been very well aware of power dynamics. Kirby Smart understood that in 2016 and 2017, he was a coach in search of a mandate. He was a coach that was trying to obtain power for himself. And so he acted as if. He presented himself as if he was the most powerful coach in college football and eventually kind of grew into that role. By contrast, Nick Saban, Lane Kiffin, very different type of coach. So Kirby Smart, after a national championship loss, when maybe he had every right to talk about what the officials did to him, he just chose not to do it. And he's never really done that. Behind the scenes, was he upset like Georgia fans were? I'm sure he probably was. But what you say publicly matters. And Kirby Smart, when it comes to stuff like this, has always said the right thing publicly. And when someone like Ryan Day cannot let the Javon Bullard hit go, especially when it's been proven to have been the correct call, I'm sorry, that does diminish Ryan Day. It makes him smaller. Makes him the same way that Nick Saban was made smaller by his own excuse-making. Injuries this and rebuilding year that. I've said before, and I'm not joking when I say this, Saban's not the biggest guy in the world, but it's almost like when you watch him go through the litany of excuses, he just starts to look even smaller. Those shoulders hunch down a little lower, sits a little lower. He just kind of gets down here like this. It's like you can see him getting smaller before your eyes when he's going through all of those excuses. And Ryan Day just seems diminished when he won't let the Javon Bullard thing go, especially when it's been proven over and over again and explained to Day publicly at least a couple of times that it was the correct call. And Day's response to that is, well, then we need to do away with replay or to be critical of replay because replay doesn't validate his feelings, therefore replay shouldn't exist, I guess, in the mind of Ryan Day. And thankfully, Kirby Smart didn't do that. And how you do anything is how you do everything. And, Kirby Smart's projection of kind of a coach at the top of the profession, I think, has gone a long way towards turning Kirby Smart into a coach at the top of the profession. And when guys don't behave that way, it is noticeable. A few more comments. Let us see what else. Christy says, we are UGA. They love to hate us. UGA, she's having fun, I think, with UGA boy Brunetti. Yeah, I mean, I wrote about this last year in one of the rare instances of me writing anything, which is that, hey, a lot of people felt good for Georgia in 2021. Hey, guys got over the hump. 40 years, a long time. Congratulations. We wonder if you'd ever do it. There's sort of a begrudging, hey, good for you guys. But when you come back and do it in 2022, all those good vibes from like other folks, that's gone. All of a sudden now Georgia's hogging the spotlight. They're hogging the podium. And people just sort of get tired of this stuff very, very quickly. And Georgia's already dealing with a certain level of fatigue. And I think the way in which you see Georgia treated is gonna, if it's not already changing, it's going to change a lot more, where there are a lot of people that will not be happy with Georgia's success. That's just true. Jealousy is just a real thing you may experience in your own life, and we're going to experience it as it relates to Georgia here too. Nature Gator pointing out something very important, that we're inside a couple of weeks from these practices beginning, and obviously we're looking ahead to the Florida game, Nature's favorite team, because they're going to play on that first Thursday night. But y'all, we got practices beginning here. I mean, it's here. Like, this is not a drill. I've got high school media day next week. Early August, those games are kicking off. Like, we've arrived. We've kind of gotten to it here. So it's really, really exciting. Really, really exciting. Frank Patterson says that Blackbeard's now complaining about the hash marks. I did not see this. But I am not surprised by that. Let's see what else. 478 Dog and D-Mart talking about Bryce Young. Listen, I like going back and forth with Alabama fans, but the one thing I'm not going to say anything bad about Bryce Young. Bryce Young is a really good player. And, of all the guys that kind of come through Bama, Bryce is one of those guys that I'm more than happy to, give a little nod to. Paul Moon says there's some fan fragility at Bama. I think that's probably the case. Christie says that Kirk Herbstreit definitely loves us under his breath. Yeah, I mean, like, we kind of give Herbstreit a hard time every now and then, but the truth is, over the years, Herbstreit's also been fairly complimentary by Georgia from time to time. Thomas Dyson says that Bryce Young is a great quarterback, deserving of everything he has, but he also blew the game for Alabama on the late interception by Keely Ringo. Could very well be the case. Scott Pete says that Stetson should have won the Heisman Trophy. He was better than we thought. I wonder what happened. I mean, I think people probably still would have given it to Caleb, but I do wonder what the voting would have looked like if the voting took place after the college football playoff. That would have been a very interesting thing, I think Caleb probably still wins, but it would have been an interesting thing. Jack Fullerton asking about the last Ohio State championship. So they did win in 2014. They did win in the first college football playoff. But your idea of comparing them with the Buffalo Bills, like, I believe they've been in 5 of the 9 playoffs. So been there 5 times, won the once. Prior to that, would have not won a championship before 2002. There's a little bit of a Buffalo Bills thing going on there. I would kind of agree with that. Frank Patterson says, I'm still waiting on Iowa State to make the playoff, as Heather Dinich predicted. Yeah, some of these ESPN types do not exactly cover themselves in glory, for sure. All right, getting late here. By the way, there's been like a gnat in the studio for 2 days. I cannot kill this thing. I mean, I'm not quick enough to get it. Like Mr. Miyagi, who got the fly with the what do you call them, chopsticks. I'm not quick enough to do that, but that thing has been flying around here for 2 days, and I cannot get rid of it. All right, so let me go one more trip around all the comment sections, and we'll wrap it up here on a Friday. Roger Hall says the level of fatigue that Georgia has setting in doesn't seem to be setting in for Bama and Clemson. I'm sure it feels that way, but I would imagine that that Bama fans and Clemson fans might say something a little bit different on that. I mean, I get the point that you're making, but I certainly think that that Bama fans and Clemson fans might say they've dealt with their share of that. It just doesn't maybe resonate as much with us because it doesn't matter to us. Roger Hall says on paper we're probably a little better than last year. I think that could be the case. I really do. Meredith D says Kirby says that Beck has work to do. Bobo likes Brock and Gunner. They like what Brock and Gunner bring to the table. Who's your quarterback you would like to see the most as the starting quarterback? Yeah, I don't know if I have a preference about the one I'd like to see the most, but I haven't heard anything this week. Obviously, Kirby said what you said, but I haven't heard anything this week that would lead me to believe that the quarterback situation isn't going to end up being Carson Beck the starter. Now, it was interesting to hear Jake Fromm point out at the end of his conversation a moment ago that maybe this is a little bit more open than we thought that it was. Perhaps that's the case, maybe. Still, if I'm setting odds on this, I'm still listing Carson Beck as the overwhelming favorite here. But it was interesting to hear Jake Fromm say what he said there a moment ago on that topic. Thor Rule says the Dogs coach up better than any team. I certainly believe that's the case. And one of the best examples of that is, look at the points that Georgia scored in the postseason this year. 50 in the SEC championship, and this past year. 50 in the SEC championship. 40-plus against Ohio State. 65 points against TCU. That's an example of good coaching. That idea of, hey, we're going to need points to win in a postseason situation, so therefore we're going to dial up our offense to another level. And, clearly, they didn't let any potential distraction bottom the national championship. Didn't overlook TCU. Didn't allow anything to be an issue there. This is an example of a very well-coached team. Cam Hasty says, we all know it's going to be Jackson Muschamp under center for Georgia. Maybe one of these days. Ricky Beasley says, next time Ohio State might be happy just playing touch football. Sometimes it seems like that's what they want. Kevin Cook says, I must learn to wax on and wax off. Listen, I love Karate Kid now. I have not seen the Cobra Kai series, but I'm sure I probably like that too. But I love Karate Kid. Growing up, a big Karate Kid fan. Rhodey Williams says we need more info on this horns down thing. If it goes, the Gator Chomp has to go also. Yeah, this is one of those things where, like, I'm sort of a traditional guy. I'm kind of, I don't know, whatever you want to call me. But I have a pretty high tolerance for players expressing themselves during games. Like, I don't care that much about the Gator Chomp, the horns down. I don't really care that much about that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I feel like that football is the kind of game where you have to have a certain edge about yourself to be able to play it. And this idea that I'm going to, collide at full speed with a dude who may be 270 pounds, and then, when that collision is over, I'm going to dust myself off and, behave with, this, parliamentary procedure, perfect decorum. It doesn't quite seem like that's how life works, right? It's like, it is just sort of human nature that, you have those kinds of collisions, the kind of willingness to even participate in something like that. When it's over, there's going to be a little bit of, heightened, emotion around that. So it's going to show itself off in a lot of different ways. You might scream in somebody's face. To me, I've never had a problem with that. You might, do a horns down gesture or a Gator Chomp or whatever else. You might do that. And you know what? Teams might do that to Georgia there as well. I mean, that's just, to me, the way football is. I have a lot higher tolerance for that in football than I do, say, a sport like baseball. Some of the preening and peacocking in the batter's box after a home run, that gets a little old to me sometimes, because I don't think that baseball is by nature nearly as violent a sport as football is. In other words, I think it's a little bit easier to compose yourself playing baseball. Like some of the stuff that Tennessee's baseball team does, Vanderbilt's baseball team does. I think that's kind of gross. But in football, I just have a little bit more of a higher tolerance for that. It's like if you're driving down the road, like a little bit of road rage, shouting at a driver. I mean, a very little bit. To me, it's just sort of to be expected, right? It's like if you're driving, you got your family in the car, you're in charge of protecting their lives, right? And so if somebody kind of cuts over on you quick, of course there's going to be a little bit of blowing off some steam in a moment like that, right? I think that's some of that's to be expected. Driving ought to be taken seriously. Football is kind of the same way, at least to me a little bit. When you talk about the brute physicality that kind of defines the sport, people are going to have a little bit of an edge about them while they're playing the sport. Their levels are just going to be turned up. So horns down, Gator Chomp, outright yelling in somebody's face, some of the stuff that Kirby Smart does on the sidelines. To me, that's just a natural byproduct of doing something as aggressive as football is. Randy Hall says Bevo to be served at Marlowe's. I wouldn't mind that. Wouldn't mind nice kind of slow cooked version of a little Bevo. That wouldn't be bad. Carter Lawson, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. Thank you. It's very nice. All right, let me go back to YouTube, and then we will be out of here after that. B.A. Style Stone Cold Style running through all the list of things that Ryan Day complains about. Green Soldier also pointing out that, and this is maybe hiding in plain sight the entire time, and this is one we like to have Green Soldier around here, that we've talked about Blackbeard, the unnaturally black beard of Ryan Day. Green Soldier pointing out that maybe we should actually call him Ryan Dye, which is actually kind of funny. Not D-I-E, but D-Y-E. That's not a bad idea. He says he can't not seem to complain about things that cost him the game. Certainly seems like that's the case. Paul Moon, the subject of bison meat. I like bison meat, man. Bison burger. I really like a bison burger. I do. And, typically I like a pretty fatty ham. You talk about bison meat being kind of lean. I typically like a pretty fatty hamburger. Like some people I think have a tendency when they go to like the butcher or something, they think they want lean, but they actually probably don't want it quite as lean as they think they do. Flavor-wise, you want that fat mixed in there. I guess the bison stuff may be a little leaner, but I like a bison burger, man. It's good. It's good. Green Soldier says actually Thomas Tyson who did the Ryan Dye thing. So I think that's worth keeping in mind. DMart42 says bison burgers are also expensive. Are they super expensive? I guess I didn't know that. It's been a while since I've had one, but aren't there like 8 gazillion buffalo? I mean, isn't like the entire Big Sky country just covered with them? Scott Pete says I like juice pouring out of my burger. Yeah, I mean, I like a steak medium rare, and I could even go towards rare, but medium rare is what I like. I have never liked my burger quite so rare, but I'm also not one of these guys that wants to be a hockey puck either. So, yeah. T. Martin says bison burgers aren't expensive on my salary. If only that were the case. I've never bought bison from the store. There's that one restaurant that does the bison burgers. I've eaten there a couple of times before. But I've never bought it from the store. I usually just buy like the frozen patties that, you kind of cook them 10 minutes one side, however many minutes on the one side, then the other. They always work out pretty well for me. That's one thing that I am not like. I mean, I like to eat, good food. I mean, obviously I've eaten way too much good food over the years, of course, but I'm usually pretty straightforward about my grocery purchases. All right. I think we're going to go. Y'all have a great weekend. Enjoy it. Make the most out of it. Watch out for these storms. It's been terrible, terrible. Also, check out R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs, including air conditioning unit, getting it tuned back up to factory fresh specs. But that's not the only thing they can do for you. Think about your water heater. If your water heater would go out, you do not want cold showers. Now, it's hot outside, but you still want a hot shower, it seems like anyway, to get that grit and grime off of you when it's so, hot and sweaty outside. So get that water heater replaced. In many cases, R.S. Andrews can do it for you the same day. But by the way, I talked to our buddy Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews. And go with the flow, making those picks for the upcoming season. That's going to be back here before you know it. So that is good times. Y'all enjoy the weekend. Check out R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com. And we'll talk to you Monday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. See you then, everybody.